So I'm just going to walk you through some conceptual concepts that will be handy for you to use in your some takeaways in your whatever educational environment, whether you're as a teacher, whether as you are a coach. All of these strategies are used. So I have dealt with a wide array of behavioral issues with kids with learning disabilities, and particularly ADHD and ADD, which basically manifests in terms of a lot of behavioral issues like behavioral problems. Then of course it is a learning disorder as it is, but anxiety and depression. I've even dealt with certain students who displayed injuries as well. So when I was teaching children with learning disabilities, and of course pair problems as well. So it was a very good intervention. Along with the educational therapy I was giving, I was using a lot of behavior modification to address these challenging issues. As a teacher, when I was working with certain educational system, there are different supervisor styles. Obviously, teachers are generally sandwiched in between the management as well as the students. And so there are different managerial styles, which is from the loosely structured to the most highly structured environment, and then the moderately structured environment, which is the collaborative managerial style. So when I set up the psychology programs in these challenging learning environments, again, behavior modification tool was very useful to get my students engaged at a very early stage, despite whatever the circumstances may be. I managed to engage my students. I managed to employ the strategies effectively. Now moving to my coaching bit, how I've used it. Essentially, I have used behavior modification to develop target behavior, maintaining goals, and then, of course, behavioral diaries and record keeping is something I used while I was coaching. So could I just ask you all now one question, and maybe you can answer in the chat box. What behaviors would you like to change? Can you all speak up, please? Maria, can you please put the...
Yes, all the attendees can respond in the chat box. What behaviors would you like to change in your classrooms? Any challenging behaviors that you face? You can respond in the chat box.
So,
negative attitude.
Okay, lovely. Anything else? Can anybody give me give more examples?
I think you can move on and suggest, Ms. Adiba.
Okay. Yes, okay, fine. So basically, typically, non-responsiveness is also one challenging behavior, unmotivated behavior, peer aggression. I mean, there are many other, tardiness, coming late to class, and even submitting assignments late is another issue that most teachers commonly encounter. And then there are other issues or any other. So you spoke of the negative attitude as well. Negative attitude actually is overall covered by these examples as well. So a little bit, I'm going to be moving now into what is behaviorism. So behaviorism focuses on the idea that all behaviors are learned through interaction with the environment. Like, we do not learn anything essentially from any other aspect, but the environment is of crucial importance. And then it is one of the most important key for educators, as it impacts how students react and behave in classrooms. So behavioral strategies are extremely important. They also suggest that teachers can directly influence how their students behave. And finally, I will talk about another approach later on when we're going to cover the other aspect of intrinsic motivation and modeling in these. So there is a related learning approach, which is called the social learning theorists. They ascertain not only we create our environment, but our environment creates us a position which is reciprocal deterministic. So basically, we are dynamically engaging with the environment to produce the effects that we want to produce. So that is how responsible we are for what is happening around us. So it's a bit of a hard reality for everyone to digest, but it has, once digested, you have some strategies, or you can even think about remediate or improving that. So what is behavior modification? Defining behavior modification is B.F. Skinner demonstrated through behavior is shaped through reinforcements and other consequences, other types of consequences. Behavior modification is a type of behavioral therapy used in a wide range of settings, from learning, education, and clinical settings. The indications for developing behavior modification plan can be for any unwanted, maladaptive, or aberrant behavior, and to teach children to reinforce new desired behavior. So it is so important for one to understand this, because we actually are so powerful, but we do not understand the power we can have. If we are trained in a skill, it could really improve our level of impact. Now, behavior modification techniques never fail. Now, through science, in the whole academia of psychology, behavior modification techniques have been widely researched, and there is a lot of data of about 5 decades backing them. So this is not a pseudoscience, which is pseudosciences that are very commonly rampant today. And so one needs to understand that it is highly scientific. If they are either applied inefficiently or inconsistently, it leads to less than desired change. So one needs to understand that if you do not employ behavior modification strategies effectively, or inefficiently, or inconsistently, so it will lead to a very less, you could say, not the perfect change, or the kind of the change you are wanting to see. So when students typically come to class, they're coming with a range of emotional mix to class. This could be in the form of attitudes and beliefs, unconscious motivations and conflicts, familial impacts, and ethnicity. Of course, socioeconomic conditions are also impacting students and their emotions. So they are bringing all of these when they're coming to class. Then, of course, we have teachers who have their own challenges. They are reporting to the management. Then they have to control a class. Then they have to also do their own review their learning, and do a lot of things. And of course, the school management also works very tirelessly to address the issues from an organizational perspective, to try and support the learning environment. So basically, this is what the learning environment typically is. As a skilled behavior modification expert, it will reduce the impact of, reduce the interference of these factors, and reduce informational processing time. So sometimes we are so bogged down with challenges of our own, or even for the students are coming, when we learn behavior modification, first we apply them to ourselves as well. So it will reduce the information processing time for better focus, retention, and retrieval. So for the teacher, the benefits are that they will be able to deliver much better with a lot of clarity. And any prior knowledge may interfere in remembering current one. For example, past performance of the students, the behavior the other day, peer issues, and the like. This holds true for teachers as well as students, and behavior modification strategies effectively will strongly impact everything, basically, and that includes the social, cognitive, and emotional and educational development of the students. So effective use of behavior modification, I think for me, one of the key improvements in your instructional design or your classroom atmosphere, that it will improve your own objectivity. So, you know, we tend to, and the other is it will simplify concepts, it will impact relevance, it will improve clarity, it delivers effective information, delivers balanced information, improves application of information, and promotes proactivity within the class. So these are some uses of behavior modification strategies for key gains in instructional designs for teachers. One other impact that you will have, one teachers would experience, behavior modification also encourages engaging in mindful practices, which means emphasis on the present behavior of concern. So your students, you will be able to narrow it down to what is happening now, then what happened yesterday, then what happened maybe at the beginning of the term. So that's your narrow focus. Mindfulness is the basic human ability to be fully present, aware of where we are and where we are, what we are doing, and not overly reactive or overwhelmed by what's going on around us. One other new offshoot of behavior modification, or another applicative technique, is dialectic behavior modification, and in that, mindfulness is also used as a tool to with behavior modification. So, what is your behavior modification powerful impacts on classroom? Behavior modification methods focus on performance and on overt behavior. Now, what I would like you to understand is, what is overt behavior? Overt behavior is something which is observable. When teachers employ behavior modifications systematically, they produce structured environments that encourage collaborative learning. Moreover, if behavior modification is applied effectively, it encourages equitable practice, as the main focus is behavior and not the student. So this is one very beautiful aspect of behavior modification. You get teachers and students both get into the neutral gear, and they are looking at the main focus of what needs to be checked or rewarded, or whatever consequences that you need to provide, or the behavior. It is the behavior and not the student. So what happened, impacts in my class that I experienced? My classes became essentially very communicable environments as a result of it. It encouraged very equitable practices. Years after year, I was given that feedback, without me even asking my students, that, my practices were very equitable. Improved instructional delivery, motivated students, it sort of engaged students, and they were intrinsically motivated. So it was not that they were studying for the grade, but they were studying more for the meaning and the mastery, for more deeper reasons. Enhance student engagement, collaborative learning, develop confidence, and of course, most of all, it became a very much, my working environment was a very safe space for students to explore the subject and to explore themselves. So, behavior modification builds.
Adiba, could you please unmute yourself?
Okay, can you hear me? Where did you guys
Just at this side. Thank you so much.
Okay, thank you so much. Okay, so can you give me examples of what is overt and covert behavior? Can anybody speak up? Can you give me an example? Is the mics open?
Yes, they can even type in the chat box if you want to respond to this activity.
I cannot see the chat box. Wait,
I can read it for you. Yeah.
Okay, fine.
Any examples of overt and covert behavior? I think we have some very shy audience today.
I think so too.
Over two students fighting. We have Nathan saying.
Okay, that's okay. So
Any
I'll just
examples.
No example.
I think you can build on.
Okay, so I'm just giving you some examples. So typically, overt behavior is physical actions. For example, shaking a hand with a friend, slapping a person, walking, eating, swimming. Verbal behavior, anything we speak, and facial expressions and body gestures. So remember, overt is something which you can directly observe. That's very observable. You can see the posture, the way the student is sitting, the way his facial expressions are or her facial expressions are. Covert behavior are mental processes. And so it is like thinking, reasoning, cognition, dreaming, whether you can't make out whether the student is really focused into your class or is he really at the back or she is really thinking about something else. Then retrieving stored information, retrieving. These are some examples, and these are processing the information and all. So I've just given the link here. So how to conduct, moving on to the, so this is typically, so the behavior of concern for behavior modification is overt behavior. We are not, as a behavioral scientist or trying to make a scientific observation, we will not look into what's happening covert. So how to do an applied behavior analysis? Typically, it's a three-part process. So it is the antecedents, the behavior, and the consequences. And it is called the ABC model. I think you can remember the acronym ABC. I don't think it would be challenging for you to remember. So ABC it is called the ABC model. How it is done? So antecedents are something that precede the behavior. Anything that is happening or the triggers, those are the antecedents, and the consequences that follow. So typically it is A comes first, behavior, antecedents come first, behavior, it causes the behavior. And however you shape the consequences as a behavioral scientist, you will only worry about how you're going to improve, because children will be coming, as I said in my previous slides, they will be coming with a lot of emotional mix to the class, whether they have had an excellent class in the previous period or the previous session, or are they tired or exhausted. You will see those are the antecedents you will have to deal with, which is causing a certain type of behavior. So you will be modifying the consequences. You will be engineering that as a teacher. So antecedents are the events and the actions or circumstances that occur immediately before a behavior. Any behavior, positive or negative, when you see somebody get so excited, there is an antecedent, or somebody feeling angry, there's an antecedent that is triggering it. Somebody getting great result will be all happy expression. You will see that expression on the student's face. When a child is coming from a negative state of mind due to some peer problems or teacher problems, you can see that very clear with your eyes, and that's causing a certain behavior, whether it is with not being motivated, not being engaged. In technical terms, antecedents of behavior, stimulus events, situations, or circumstances that precede an operant response. More commonly understood, an antecedent is what was happening, or who was present right before the behavior occurred. As we say, what happened before that? Whenever we're trying to understand some scene or some kind of crazy behavior or any kind of negative behavior, we're trying to figure out what happened before that, right? So those are typically the antecedents. Typically, what can teachers do to provide better antecedents? Now, the only control you have is provide a stable learning environment. Now, this is extremely essential. So if you will not produce, teachers do not engage their students, or they design the classroom structure which does not give a settled environment for students, so a certain routine that they know they have to do, they have to hand in their assignment or their homework and put it on the table. You have to develop a system. So that's basically what antecedents you can do. That's the only antecedent you can control. When they're coming from another class, or they're coming from home, they're disturbed about something or the other, you have no control over it. And you will not be, as teachers, trying to address that, because you're not psychoanalysts. You cannot get into any student's head. So let's understand the limitations of your so basically, typically, to arrange the environment best for desired behaviors to occur. So you have to do your best to do that. So these are some of the routines, like bell ringers, maximize entering class, begin class on time. This is something I have noticed in various educational settings, where students, the feedback I have gotten over the years about various classes as an instructional designer, and also assisting the management, and of course assisting students to facilitate mentoring them. They've had students, they've spoken of the fact that, Miss, our teacher leaves the class 5 minutes early, or she begins the class 10 minutes late. So there are times that students feel very unraveled by these factors. Leaving the class, work until almost the bell, turning in work, establish a system. So you need to have a kind of a system within the class, using the restroom, minimizing the interruptions and all of that. So this is, I've taken this slide from Pinterest. And okay, so now we're moving to the second part of the presentation, which is the behavior. Positive and negative behavior is viewed as a learned response that can be unlearned. by rearranging the events before and after the behavior. Is that clear, all of you? So positive and negative behavior is viewed as a learned response that can be unlearned.
You kindly request all the mics to be muted. Thank you.
So they can be by rearranging the events before and after the behavior. So when you categorize behavior, there are behaviors that broadly fall under two categories. Deficient, the behaviors you want students to show. For example, manners or being more positive in class by smiling more, or giving in the assignment on time. So you want to see that to happen. And behavioral excess are typically those behaviors you'd want to see less of. For example, somebody speaking out of turn in class, or some student trying to, having an emotional outburst, or gets reactive within the class. So what are you going to do? So these are the two types of behaviors that you will categorize them. So one is the deficient you want to see more of, and the other is behavioral excess, the behaviors you want to see less of. So anybody would like to engage now? Maria, do you think you can engage if nothing else?
So deficient and excessive behavior, anybody would like to express here? Express their thoughts about it?
You want to give any examples? Anybody? So I'll move to the next slide. Have anybody elaborated sufficiently on that? So when you're becoming a skilled observer, you need to understand categorized behavior. Now we move to the third part of this. How do you reinforce a behavior? Negative or positive will be shaped by the kind of reinforcements you will give. So basically, we've covered the antecedents, we've understood what the behavior is, because there is deficient or excess behavior. And of course, the other aspect that we're going to address as a behavioral, as a behaviorist, the position we take is we're going to observe overt behavior, which is observable. So these are the 3 points you will remember when you are observing any behavior. You're not going to go into the covert aspect. So the last being is the consequences. The function of behavior is determined by the consequences that follow the behavior. So typically, the antecedents could be your classroom routines, how you model a certain behavior, some kind of feedback you provide, or the kind of goals that you outline. Then of course behaviors could be desired. Some students may respond positively or favorably to this, right? Whereas other students may respond to in an undesired way by saying, oh ma'am, I don't want to do this, for example, or this seems very challenging. So it would be undesired response. They're not motivated. So the consequences are typically 4-5 times, and the 4-5 types, And the one that I prefer and the one that I subscribe is start with a positive reinforcement. Then it moves to the negative reinforcement. I would not sequence punishment as behaviorists. We do not use punishment in the typical manner. We use it in a very different way, and I will explain and elaborate as a behaviorist. The typical idea of punishment is like a makeup, or I'll give you certain examples later on in the slides as to what punishment entails: extension, escape, and avoidance. how we choose reinforcement, whether the behavior falls in deficient or excess. And okay, the step 2 is to choose the right consequences. A behavior will get stronger or weaker, or perhaps even extinguished, depending on what type of consequences follow it. Consequences are the type of reinforcements that follow. All behavior are maintained and changed and shaped by the consequences of the behavior. And there's 4. We've just spoken of all of these. I will talk about these 4 in an elaboration. So typically, if you want to, for deficient behaviors, the behaviors you want to see more of, you use positive reinforcement, right? You model the desired behavior, or you teach the desired behavior, and whenever that behavior is happening, you reward it, either with a smile, a nod, an acknowledgement, an approval. These are the non-verbal ways of you providing positive reinforcements. And the other aspects are, you can give them points in class for showing, or for example, you want them to submit their assignments on time, so you can use a system of points in your class. Ignoring is something typically we do for behavioral excess. Excess behaviors are generally, somebody is being talkative, you will, perhaps pause and then just divert the attention of the class to another place. So instead of reprimanding the student, the best approach is to just divert the attention of the class on a different aspect of the lesson, so that you're able to ignore that. Negative reinforcement is basically providing a threat of a punishment. It is not exactly punishment, but just giving a kind of a reminder as to, okay, if this will not happen, we'll have to consider other options or other ways of dealing with this. And then, of course, punishment, we will talk about it at a later stage, but it is not like the corporal punishment at all, as just spoken about. It is not remotely like that. So typically, punishment for children with behavioral problems, which I have dealt with, is timeout. And timeout actually begins with maybe 10 seconds or 5 to 10 seconds, and it builds up. When you give children timeout, you make them sit in a corner for maybe 5 to 10 seconds, maybe to half a minute tops. The maximum you will take it to a minute or 2 minutes. That's what punishment is for behavioral, for dealing with the most challenging behaviors. So positive reinforcement is a system of free rewards, which you could, and motivators for anybody in class or in college, however you'd like to do it. And then you have the token economy that typically I use token economy at the beginning of setting up the pace in my class. So I devised a system of points in the introductory class of mine. I gave students a handout that they will be allocated additional points for submitting their assignments on time. This was discussed and encouraged. Time management was a very key aspect that I identified, which I felt most in the environments I taught was one of the key problems. So from 1 to +2, from 0 to 1 to +2 was the amount of points every time the student showed that behavior. So for the first term, I'm talking about only the first term, I made sure I recorded the kind of points that they earned in the class, and I used to add it to the assignments and to the final exam total. So for example, somebody was scoring a little less in their exam, those additional points were added to make up for the score. So the students found that happening. So you have to walk the talk. Important for any behavior management program is you can't devise a program and then just go out missing on it. So it is important, and students are constantly observing that. So punishment is something like this. I've given this from the book that I will quote it later, and that's a very technical book. If you want to read up on it, it's an ebook available online. So positive reinforcement, present a positive reinforcer. Teacher gives independent study time. The learner studies. The reinforcement is teacher praises. This is the positive reinforcement. The learner for good work. Okay, this is example 1. Then negative reinforcement is removing the negative reinforcer. Teacher gives independent study time. Learner studies. Teacher says learner does not have to do homework. So this is kind of a negative reinforcement, removing a negative reinforcer, so you don't need to do homework. We constantly do that, right? Punishment for the negative, for the present negative reinforcer. Teacher gives independent studies time. Learner, in this example, wastes that time. Teacher gives homework. So this is what punishment means. The other is teacher gives independent study time, learner wastes the time. Teacher says the learner will miss free time. So this is also removing. So whatever the free time is or the break time is that there won't be too much of, you will have to work through your recess, so you will have to stay back after class for 5 more minutes, or whatever it is that works for your students, you will do that. That's what punishment is. Alternatives to punishment are, of course, you change the discriminative stimuli. Most misbehaving students away from the misbehaving students away from misbehaving students. So typically, if you might have even noticed the structure of your class and how students place themselves, to change the seating arrangement. I did that many times. And I used to do that not because keeping those naughty students in my mind. What I did was I just did that randomly as well. So nobody even felt that I was doing it because of the fact that I was doing it for those particular students. But when you see a pattern, you have to address it as discreetly as possible so that the message goes home, as well as the fact that you are able to do something positive. Allow the unwanted behavior to continue. Have the students who stands when he or she should be sitting continue to stand, for example. Extinguish the unwanted behavior, ignore minor misbehavior so that it is not reinforced by the teacher attention. And condition and incompatible behavior, reinforce learning progress, which occurs only when student is not misbehaving. So very important thing is sometimes these kids are displaying good behavior. So what you need to remember is when you are not when we are not, it's not about the student, it's about the behavior. You're trying to make a note or observe the times the behavior is, positive behavior is being displayed by the student, right? And so you only, you reward or you reinforce when that student is smiling out of turn, or when it's not, you reinforce that behavior. So that behavior will happen more frequently. So a lot of the time students are not even aware of this discrimination because of, the time in their life and the challenges that they're going through. So some very important aspects of behavior modification is you got to walk the talk. So be a very good role model and be very careful about how you do this. So you have got to walk the talk. You have to define the goal. The goal is not about achieving A, B, C, D, A, B, A grade. It is more about you becoming a better version of yourself, gaining mastery of your own learning or improving your learning every time. And those small progresses that they make in class, make sure that that is being rewarded and noted as well. Mentoring, modeled counseling and guidance over a period of time. So a lot of the time teachers, classes benefit when teachers provide mentoring to students, and they develop a kind of a relationship to assist them otherwise too. So the summary, I'm coming to towards the end of my presentation. Behavior modification and practice by all teachers and educators informally. This is a fact. Okay, so this behavior modification program that I've talked about is about using in a systematic, structured manner. Using this method in this manner will induce behavioral change. If you do it systematically, it'll do. The applications of behavior modification are used widespread across industry, from mental health, special education, and the corporates to evoke the established structure. So behavior modification is not narrowed down to education or mental health. For example, the conventional leadership models that are being used, their foundation is on behavior modification. It is such a strong technique that, or method, that a lot of the new approaches that you hear of constantly around you, like CBT, like clinical, on the therapeutic side, it is cognitive behavioral therapy, and you have this transactional analysis. A lot of the new approaches, the core structure of it has been defined by behavior modification, and the corporates, the leadership models, and the communicative models are all around that. This presentation covered the basic assumptions and applications from an experiential perspective. Hope you enjoyed this share and find it useful to apply. Thank you. So, some recommended reading. This is a very comprehensive book that I found, and I have put the URL under this link, here, and you can Google it, you can download it. It's an ebook free available. It's a technical book, very comprehensive one that you could find useful and find lots of answers. And then, of course, there's some extended readings here that you can also find it useful. Thank you. And here are my details. Okay. Thank you, Mario.
Thank you so much, Adiba. Thank you. It was very informative. We thoroughly enjoyed it. It's time for question and answers now. You can open your mics one by one and ask questions to the presenter directly. Please go ahead. We had some responses earlier from Gulshan Ara. When you asked about covert and overt behavior, she said clear action and ambiguous actions.
Okay, lovely.
Nathan added on saying covert, one student making another feeling like they cannot speak or they really want to say. And Afsana said overt is aggression.
Okay, yeah, it can be aggression as well, of course.
And covert is imagination.
Yes, yes, precisely. You can't measure covert, basically. It's very difficult to understand what's going on inside the head of anyone. So, yeah.
We had a question there as well. Can there be positive overt behaviors by Nathan?
Sorry, by?
Can there be positive overt behaviors? Nathan is asking this question as well.
Of course, there can be positive overt behavior if you design basically your system of consequences effectively. And the positive overt behavior is, when you see a child not, for example, saying thank you as much as often as you like, you will model that behavior one, for example, and then you would ask, you will, every time when the child shows that behavior, you're going to reinforce it by a smile or some positive encouragement by saying, oh, this is great, you remembered, oh, this is lovely. Whatever it is, whatever the verbal cues or the non-verbal cues, which could be your facial expressions as well.
Great, thank you. Any more questions?
Okay.
We're happy to address your questions now. You can type in the chat box as well.
If you have any more questions, I'm happy to answer.
Okay, I think we have come to an end of our webinar. Thank you so much, Ms. Adiba Khurshid, to join today at our platform. We are really honored to have you, and we're looking forward to the next 2 sessions with us. Those attendees who have joined us, you are requested to please record your attendance before leaving for your certificates that is shared in your chat box. Thank you so much, Mrs. Adiba. It was a pleasure having you.
Okay, thank you so much. It was likewise an excellent experience, sharing my experience with everyone. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye. The recording of this webinar will also be uploaded on our YouTube channel as well as on our website in next 24 hours. And thank you for joining us today.
Thank you.